Here it is, straight off the pipe. Dash and Durst. Tonight I'm filling in for Dash, or trying to. Here he is, Mr. Mike Durst himself. Ooh, I think we've got Frozen. You there, Mike? All right. You started off. We're already live, but I think you froze up there for a second.
Collapse in the third period last night. I thought we were in good shape through 40 minutes, and then the Ottawa Senators came to life and took a lead, and Nurse tied it up, and Ottawa takes the lead again, and we could never catch up, and now we're in the depths of despair once again. What did you think of that?
Oh man, I don't know where to begin. I mean, this is, it's just that way, right? I mean, Connor said it. He said they're finding a way to lose games. Look, I mean, there's lots going on with this team, and the first goal is just one of those things. And I think even though we got up to that 3-1 game, when everything kind of goes according to what the game plan is, which is the other team will score first, and you won't get the saves when you need them. And hey, look, I'm not going to be on that bandwagon to blame Skinner, but he didn't make the saves when you wanted him to. It just seems like inevitable. At 3-1, I know I didn't feel like it was an in the bag kind of game. I felt a little bit more confident than I felt in a long time, but I didn't leave that game last night being surprised in any way, shape, or form. Did you?
It almost seems like you're waiting for that bad to happen, right? I mean, and I don't, Terry Jones wanted to throw Stuart Skinner under the bus. I think, him coming in there and kind of dethroning Koskinen to be the guy here. I think that put some pressure on him, and I think maybe that kind of got to him a little bit in the third, and the one mistake leads to two, leads to three kind of thing. I think Bouchard and Lagesson were victims of circumstance as well. They're on the ice for all three of those. I thought there were some guys that had good efforts, but yeah, you've got to take that 3-1 lead and extend it to 4-5, 6-1, and maybe at 8-1. As an Oiler fan right now, you can start to breathe, because it's almost like an epic collapse is just on the horizon. That I don't know, and I don't know what to think of last night. Like, I don't know who's at fault, what to blame, really. I don't know if that's because you're in a good spot and then the wheels fall off. Like, personally, I don't know if that's one that I can pin on coaching or what. But
here's one thing. I got a question for you, because you're winning 3-1, right? You're doing all right. You're skating through. Your top line, they've had an answer for all night, right? But you've got guys that seem to come to play last night. Yamamoto, Yarvi, I thought had a hell of a game in there, getting pucks and making some plays. I thought that was Hyman's best game in a while. Do you play the? Maybe it's just me, but I think maybe you play those guys more, right? Like, somebody said it seemed like he benched Yamamoto after he scored that goal. He didn't bench Yamamoto; he benched the whole team. Right? Like, the whole team sat while Connor and Leon played, the whole game. Hey, and look, they made some chances, but I thought DJ Smith coached Ottawa perfectly on how to defend against them or break them up. Do something. I don't know. To me, there is a bit of a coaching thing there, right? Like, you're throwing the same shit against the wall. It wasn't working during the first part of the game, but the stuff that was working, you decided to let that sit on the bench and get cold. I don't know.
didn't really seem like McDavid and Draisaitl were really on the same page. Like Connor was trying to, go wide and cut to the net, and he had his legs last night. Like he was going, but I didn't see a lot of dangerous chances from him really, and trying to go through a whole team and all that. Like I don't know, it just doesn't seem like much of a plan. It's not like Draisaitl's right there with him on a lot of that. I thought Cassian was all right, but he has a hard time keeping up, to Connor,
Yeah,
and so
he
does
does.
and so does everybody. But yeah, I mean, Fogel last night, I think he fell down like he was playing in novice again. But that was a beautiful alley-oop pass to Yamamoto there to spring him for that breakaway.
Oh yeah.
And it was really almost like a nothing play. Like we're going to throw it off the scoreboard, but he did see him way up ice and it hit him and he was gone. And I thought Yamamoto was going to run out of real estate. And I think him falling down kind of spooked the goalie a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. No, I don't.
And,
He didn't get everything on that or anything on that, but
no, but had enough to presence of mind to kind of just leave it 5-hole, and it kind of went in for him. So yeah, and Puljujärvi and Hyman, and McLeod, that trio, when they were on the ice, they were in the offensive end and in the offensive end for sustained time. Like it was almost a wasted effort. I mean, Nurse played a hell of a game with Cece. And Keith and Barry were okay. Like I saw Barry put one on the tape of the Sens early in the first period, but after that he settled down, and I honestly think that was Duncan Keith's best game as an Edmonton Oiler, and kind of a wasted effort.
So here, we could, and I see this now, right? Like the fans they're starting to turn on the quote unquote leadership of this team, Draisaitl and McDavid. And I get that because they're the guys, right? And McDavid didn't do himself any favors for that part of the fan base that doesn't want to see Evander Kane, right? When he said it is what it is, right? So people are starting to question these guys. But here's my thinking on that. And I'm all right. You question McDavid and Draisaitl. In fact, I've got a lot of questions for those guys myself. But in a night like last night, where Draisaitl lately seems to be a bit of a neutral zone turnover machine, right? And McDavid's doing this, trying to get through the whole team thing like they're the New York Rangers again, right? For that next goal of the year candidate. But when you're, man, this to me, like, be prepared, anybody that's listening in right now, because I'm not going to find any good in what Tippett's doing with this team. But when you are Tippett and you are treating those players as the only thing that's going to get you through to the next level, then they're going to put it on their back and do everything they think they need to do by themselves, because that's how you're coaching this team, right? And that's how it's going to work. Like, it just, it's crazy. Like, this is the way that Tippett's coached them to believe that they're the only guys that are going to change the way that this team comes out of this, right? Like, everything's on their back. They got to do everything. And I think they're faltering a little bit, because that's a lot of pressure for two guys to carry a whole team. And they don't need to. I think that there's a whole bunch of team there that is purely capable of, as we saw last night, the bottom 6, bottom 9, they were the ones producing. And I just think we got to start, or not we, but Tippett or whoever ends up, and we'll talk about what that, what may or may not happen tomorrow. But they got to start trusting in the rest of the team, right? Look, we don't need to be professional hockey players to know you've played enough hockey, right, Mike, that if you played 15 minutes of an hour-long game, how good are you going to be when you're called upon, right? You got to be in the game. You got to be playing more than that. Mr. T on YouTube says, I really liked how McLeod played last night. Well, that's my thoughts. I'll let you. It's your show. I'm taking over here.
Okay. That's all right. Yeah, I don't know. You got to get everybody, kind of engaged somehow. And if yeah, you ride your Clydesdales, but you can't do that all the time, or you wear them out. And other teams like adapt, and they game plan for Connor and Leon, and they don't game plan really for a lot of everything else, because you can't game plan for everything. So you game plan to what you think is going to give you the best chance of winning. And there is starting to be a little bit of chemistry between McLeod, Hyman, and Puliarvi, and then you go away from it. Yamamoto and Fogle almost had instant chemistry last night, and you go away from it. Perlini scores a goal, and then how much more quality ice time did he see? Not a lot. And I don't know. You question leadership. I looked at Nurse after he scored, to tie it back at 4. And I saw him on the bench there, and he's kind of jawing at people and trying to get them going, and he's mad. He's like, we can't, I know what he's thinking. He's thinking, we can't lose to the Senators. Let's go. We're back in the game. We need the next goal. And I know he was thinking that, and it didn't seem like it was really reciprocated by anybody. So it's like he's barking to nobody.
But I still go to this point, Mike. Like, it doesn't matter. You're Darnell Nurse. You go out there, you score a goal, and you get to the bench, and you're screaming at me to do something. But I know I'm looking behind me, and I'm saying, hey, what's my coach? Coach, like, I'm ready to do something. Put me in. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play, right?
Yeah.
But I'm riding the pine the rest of the game. I might have scored, but I'm going to ride the pine. Right? Instead, I'm sitting there and I'm watching, McDavid and Draisaitl go out shift after shift after shift. Right? Like, we're not. It's not like we're winning. It's not like I'm watching them go out shift after shift, and your team's winning games, right? Because I've been on that side too. I've been on teams where there's guys that are all-stars, superstars. They get out there and they win games for you night after night after night, and you're like, give them more ice time. But right now they're not winning games night after night after night. I'm looking at my coach and I do something right, and you know what? I'm sitting there riding a pine. Right? Like, this is just. It's just ridiculous, and McDavid and Draisaitl don't need that type of pressure in this time, and you got to change up your strategy, your game strategy. There are a lot of things good about last night, right? Like, you're talking about secondary performance, a lot of good things, right? Like, there's just so many. I thought, like, watching Nurse score again, Bouchard rattled one off the post, right? Like, he continues to do some good things. I thought for even all the stuff that we get on Keith and that, Keith had a couple of outlets that were, bang on, nice outlets. A lot of good things that team's doing. It's just that, there's no consistency and no reward for doing the right things night after night, right? Like, it's just, the strategy is, let's see how much I can get McDavid and Draisaitl out there and play them, and then you're up 3-1, right? Like, I thought that we've had this in the group chat, but I thought that Tippett was meant to be a defensive coach, right? Like, let's adjust now that we've had this, lead, right? Let's adjust our game. Let's make damn sure that, let's help our goalie out, right? Let's help Skinner out. Skinner wasn't great, but it's not like we were doing him any favors either, right? Like, he's not, oh, shit. I don't know where to start.
Against the Islanders, like, they had a lead going into the third, and they sat back. They sat back in a trap. They stopped forechecking. And you can't. They're not good enough defensively to do that for a full period.
Fair enough.
With a 1-goal lead. Last night they had a 2-goal lead. Yeah. And part of me wants to see them still push for offense to get that insurance goal. Insurance on your insurance goal. Another part of me wants to see them, it's crunch time, tighten up defensively, and don't give, like, they gave up 13 shots heading into the third period. And I think Ottawa ended with about 26 shots on goal. So in the third period, they did as much damage as they did the 2 periods before. So what changed? I mean, really, you should be playing the same game, if not tightening up even more defensively, and they didn't. And that might be the single most thing you could have as for an indictment against the coaching staff.
Yeah, and there's lots of areas to start. I mean, that's exactly it, right? I mean, you said it, right? Like tighten up, do those things. I mean, part of it's mental. To me that, argue with me all you want, but to me a coach is out there to help with the mental aspect of the game, right? Like I said, if you're watching tonight, this is, I'm not going to be easy on Tippett tonight. Like this is and we shouldn't be. The guy.
Have you noticed a change in him? I mean, the last game that they lost, where Koskinen was in net, he took him to the woodshed, right, so to speak. And maybe it's some people want to say it's about time and whatever. That happened, and then after last night, I listened to him, and Jim Matheson teed him up to absolutely lay into Skinner. And he laid off of that. He didn't throw Skinner under the bus. And it almost seems like he's just numb right now. Like he was pissed after that game. I forget the last one that we lost where Koskinen was in net. He was pissed after that. But after last night, it almost sounded like the guy was numb. And I almost would prefer that he was pissed off rather than numb, because that, to me, signals a guy that doesn't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, and he can't, right? Like he can't know what to do. He's tried everything that's in his bag of tricks, right? Like this is the moment where it's up to, Holland to step in and say, "Look, like I've seen enough." And you're not the guy to get us over this hump. Look, Tippett's a fine coach. He's had a good regular season career. He's not had a great playoff career, and I keep going on that. But shit, like, was it the wrong thing to hire him for coach? I don't know. I mean, he got us into the playoffs right out of the hop, and and he's had some bad luck. But at some point, right, Paul Maurice says, "You know what? Sorry, guys. Like, I think my time's done here." Now, there's not a lot of coaches going to do that, and I think in terms of your contract and everything, if you resign, you walk away from whatever dollars are left, right? Whereas if you get fired, it's a guaranteed contract, right? So you'll get the money left there. I think, if you were to get Tippett into a room and be able to get the truth out of him, I think he'd probably say exactly what Paul Maurice says. He says, I don't have the room anymore. Right? Like I'm not the guy for this job. Like he's used everything he can do. He doesn't know the strategy beyond what he's tried. And it's not been successful so far. And everybody's saying goaltending, right? Like don't tell me goaltending. A lot of teams have done better with shittier goaltending. Right? Like, maybe it's Schwartz, I don't know, but teams have done better with shittier goaltending.
I think there's a lot of everything going on here.
Yeah,
it's not just one thing. Like when Dash and you were talking, and he was talking about, your basement leaking, and, you got your weeping tile, you've got all these issues, crack foundation, all that. I think he's onto something. Like, yeah, I think goaltending is a bit of an issue. I think we probably could use a defenseman to solidify kind of the third pairing there. Make that a little bit stronger, a little bit of help up front. And honestly, it may just be like a fait accompli here. We, like you said, Tippett was, to his credit, I mean, he's improved special teams immensely. And that goes to kind of all the staff, I guess. And, playoff team and back-to-back seasons, but first round exits. So, and in both situations, you were a higher ranked seed coming in. So, that lends itself to, tactical issues. Still can't figure out, this team's identity. And a lot of times the team's identity stems from the coaching staff. What you're going to get out of a Barry Trotz team. Daryl Sutter, what you're getting out of Sutter hockey. That hasn't changed in 40 years? What is Dave Tippett's stamp on this team? I couldn't tell you.
Well, here's the thing, right? As well, and I 100% agree with you because I've talked about that a lot. The if you were to take would you take the Oilers roster over the Canucks roster? Because I sure as hell would, right? If I was a coach and I had my choice of the Oilers roster or the Canucks roster, and the Oilers roster with all of its deficiencies, which we know it has, I would still take the Oilers roster 100% of the time. Flames roster versus the Oilers roster, same thing. But I look at the Canucks, who have done well recently under a new coaching style, right? They beat Washington tonight, which we wouldn't, we'd be lucky if we didn't get blown out 10-1 against Washington. They've got Demko and they've got DiPietro backing them up, right? Like, we're not talking, like if the Oilers were to trade for either of those guys, there'd be a shitload of fans out there that would be pissed off, right? If they got them in net. They've got they've got nothing that I would say, like Chason's playing on their team. We got rid of him, right? Like, this is not a team that, anybody's going to take. If you just put them on paper and you say, are we going to take the Canucks or are we going to take the Oilers roster? People are going to take the Oilers roster.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Would you rather Tyler Ennis than some of the guys that are in our bottom six?
No, I mean, I maybe not, but look at, Fogle, I think, is a hell of a hockey player. Bottom six player, right? Like, we've seen moments. Perlini should be able to score some goals, right? He obviously he's not going to score the way he did in preseason because he's not getting the minutes. But
it's starting to come for him, though.
Yeah, I mean, he had this is off of YouTube. Shore had 6 minutes. Perlini had 5:23 last night. Mr. T says Ennis over Turris any day. Okay, I agree with that. And the thing is Holland did do some things to shore up the depth on this team, and all of us were raving about it at the beginning of the year, right? I shouldn't say we're raving about it, but we were saying this team has more depth than we've seen. Connor McDavid said that. It's more depth on this team than I've seen since we started here, right? But now we're regressing to a non-playoff team. Like, there is a point at which I get COVID, I get injuries, I get all this shit. But everybody else is dealing with that, and they're doing just fine, or they're getting through it, right? But we've regressed, and we've supposedly added to our team. Sure, goaltending's a bit of an issue, but I think Skinner actually is a good goaltender that can keep you in enough nights that you should be able to, with this lineup, outscore the opposition. Yeah. We expected that from this team. Shannon on Facebook says McLeod was great last night. This is the first time, because we're forced to, that McLeod's getting anything resembling ice time. McLeod's a worthwhile player to get good time on this team, right? If you want your bottom six to be scoring, give McLeod a little bit more responsibility, right? James on YouTube says, literally the most depressing year in the past 20 years. The emotional roller coaster is just heartbreaking. That's where we're at. We're regressing. I don't know. Did you not think this was the most depth we've had on forward in a long time this year, going into the season?
I got, last night watching that game, you're going through it, and they're in good shape going into the third. And then the wheels of the bus just come completely off. And at the end of the game, I'm left feeling like I just got, punched in the gut and had the wind knocked out of me. Like, I we're in that spot again where it's, you watch the games and I watch it to the bitter end, but the enjoyment factor has really gone down, and and we're just fans. I mean, you can see the frustration and letdown in Connor's face in his interview, probably more so than any other time he's ever done an interview.
Yeah, well, he's got to feel responsible, right? Like he spent 25 minutes on the ice last night. If I played half the game like that, and he played pretty close to half the game, I'd feel damn responsible for losing, right? What was his plus minus? Was -2 last night, wasn't it? Am I wrong on that?
Not sure.
I think he finished -2. I'm going to look it up. But I mean, yeah, like he should feel right, like he should feel a little bit down and responsible, right? Like he, I'm positive he finished -2 last night.
I think Bieksa, as much as I hated him when he was wearing a Canucks and Ducks jersey, when he was saying last night is they have to take more pride in the defensive side of the game, and it's putting a puck in the net is just as important as keeping a puck out of your own net, and the whole team needs to take pride in doing both. So that's the lesson really that needs to be learned. And you can put that on players, you can put that on coaching. I don't know. It's difficult watching this kind of spin cycle of misery night after night. They need to get a win, and it doesn't get any easier. I mean, Florida's up next on Thursday, and if Florida doesn't make the Stanley Cup final, they probably are getting very close to that. They were probably an Eastern Conference final candidate. Who knows? But
is this here? Let me ask you something. Is this the joke of the NHL right now? Is this franchise the joke of the NHL? Somebody on Twitter put, if you're embarrassed about this team, then you're not a fan. Well, I disagree with that, because look, this team is incredibly embarrassing to be a fan right now. The only positive is that the Flames are in a bit of a tailspin too, right? Otherwise I'd be getting texts every freaking day. But Biz Nasty posted last night. He said, they're in the next 10 games, the Oilers face the Panthers twice, Lightning, Predators, Capitals, and the Hurricanes. Biz Nasty says Edmonton might get right at this rate.
Yeah. I'm not even embarrassed. It's beyond that. Like it's depression. Yeah. I mean, embarrassing is getting blown out one night, 13-1 or something like that. When you're this far off, I mean, it's beyond embarrassing. It's just like,
let me ask you as a fan,
how do you let it get this bad and not do anything about it?
Well, and that's probably what I would say. What the question I want to ask you is, how, as a fan, like, how do you feel about this? And that's my answer is, how do you let it get this bad? Right? Like, how do you let it even get to this point? Because I would suggest to you that 3, 4, 5 games ago, most Oilers fans were calling for a shakeup of some sort. Right? But, maybe even more than that, 6, 7 games ago. Like, folks saw the writing on the wall in mid-December. So how is it that you can sit there and keep, putting out the same lineup, same coaching staff, same everything for that long? That's frustrating as a fan. All we can do is sit here on our podcasts, on our blogs, on all Spectre can do, or any of those guys can write about it. But there's one guy at the helm here that's got to do something about it, right? And the other guy that can do something about it on a game-by-game basis doesn't seem to be doing anything, right? Like Tippett doesn't seem to be changing his strategy at all, right? So what do you do? What do you do? Like what, you know, like this you keep talking about the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. And that's exactly for, the greater part of 15 years the Oilers have been doing, right? Like that, it's year after year. It's the rest of the team is starting to pass us by. And yes, it's getting frustrating. It's getting embarrassing to be a fan. It's getting harder and harder every year. If you didn't think the decade of darkness was was bad, which it was, now we've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, arguably the two best players in the whole world. And we're what, 2 points out of a wild card spot, right? And having to pass 2 or 3 people to get there, including our rivals to the south that have a dinosaur coaching them behind the bench. Right? Like I don't know. Come on, man. Like somebody should be knocking on Holland's door and asking him if he can hear or see anything that's going on.
The thing that's troublesome too is, like from a coaching standpoint, Cooper Marody, he's doing well in the AHL. Won't give him a sniff here with the big club. Like, what do you have to lose? Honestly, like, give him some time. Put him in. Benson's in COVID protocol or whatever right now, but he'll be out. Pair that line that was lighting up the AHL. Give them some time. Like, you don't have anything to lose. Go for it. I think give Skinner another game. See, if he can bounce back. I think what do you have to lose there?
And the answer that we've heard so far, the biggest answer is Evander Kane. Now,
right,
about over half the people watching tonight probably think Evander Kane should be an Oiler, right? But Kevin Bieksa, who I think a lot of people like now, right? Even though he's still Bieksa, but he said it. He's the thing he said shocked me the most is he said, if I'm any other team in the league, there's no way I let Bieksa on this team. But the Oilers, well, maybe. Why is it even there? Why is it even at that point?
You want to talk about a major shakeup? I mean, that's it right there in a nutshell. That's an earthquake in your dressing room.
Oh man!
And it can either go one way or the other. And you're at a spot right now where, what do you have to lose? Everything? Well, you're on your way to that anyway. So. And what's the acquisition cost? Really not a lot, $1 million, $1.5 million. Okay. I know there's a lot of people that are totally against it, and he's got, his share of baggage. Is he guilty of all the transgressions that have been accused from him? I have no idea. Some people think he's guilty of sin, and once you get into abuse stuff, that a lot of it doesn't come forward anyway, so there might be more there than what's out there. And he has custody of his kids, so that means he's a saint. Well, no, it doesn't. It means he's got deep pockets and probably can afford a good lawyer and might have won that way. It doesn't mean that he's a good guy or a bad guy or anything. It just means that the judge thought that the kids were better off with him. But I don't want to pass judgment on the guy. That's for me to condemn somebody I've never met. That's not what I'm about. I usually judge people after I meet them and have an interaction with them, not based on their past history. But to me, if you did get Evander Kane, it's like taking on Antonio Brown and like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did 2 years ago, and they won a Super Bowl from it, but this season it didn't work out, so they had to cut the guy loose. And they probably would have been Super Bowl favorites again this year if he was on the straight and narrow, but he wasn't. So they still might win a Super Bowl without him. They're a pretty good team.
Well, here's the thing: it should never get to the point where we're having to look at Kane. Should never have been at that point.
No. What contributes to that is, taking a Duncan Keith at full salary. I didn't mind the Keith trade myself, but I was never a fan of taking on his full salary. And to me, you've got a GM that's a little bit scared to negotiate or too nice of a guy to ask for a better deal. Like, it's like buying a car. Keith wasn't a brand new car. He's got a few miles on him.
Here.
So
let me give you some food for thought here, because we're going to talk a little bit about Evander Kane.
Okay.
As an Oilers fan, we have, for the most part, left Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl alone, right? We have not gone after them for anything, for fear of, hey, for one, we're a little fragile because we've been conditioned to believe that they might ask to leave, right? At some point. I mean, we've heard it a million times. They might be asked to leave. So we don't want to load up on them. And anytime somebody has loaded up on them, we get, we ratio them. I'm not going to make myself any fans for saying this, but there is a bit of a reckoning for Connor McDavid right now that, we need to look at, which is, everybody's talking about our defense on this team. Who did he pick? He picked Duncan Keith. He picked Tyson Barrie, and now we're asking him, well, what about Evander Kane? And he's going to pick Evander Kane. Like, he's partly responsible for the shit show that is our defense right now, where the second and third highest paid guys, aren't really great defensively, right? Like, look, there's no doubt in my mind Connor McDavid is the best player in the world. Maybe the best player we've ever been able to see just from a skill level point. But he's got to take something on the head here. He's got to stand for something. He's got to get up there and say, look, these are my guys. This is what I've done, right? Like, that's him. It's not,
but
he is this team.
He could want Duncan Keith, to be a part of this club. Him and Draisaitl both, because Keith was really good in that play-in series.
Series, and they never did shit after that, Chicago, right? Yeah.
Right. And that can hold water. But as a GM, you're targeting this guy. You don't have to assume the salary that Chicago at the time decided to pay Keith. You don't have to assume that full, that full meal deal. If they would have picked up Keith at $4 million, instead of the 5.5 or 5.4, whatever the exact number is, that extra $1.5 million would have went a long ways to doing some other things.
Oh yeah,
that's my issue with it.
There are things that Holland could have done better negotiating, and Holland's got a lot of work to do. But there are a lot of areas of this team that need some work, and what I'm trying to point out is from a leadership level, those guys they need a little bit of work too, right? Like, I love Connor McDavid, I love Draisaitl, but
I'll throw something else at you. That extra $1.5 million that would have been there if you would have chiseled the price down to $4 million for Keith, and don't tell me Chicago wouldn't have dealt him and ate $1.5 million to get rid of that. You tack on that $1.5 million to Adam Larson's contract when you're negotiating with him, that probably keeps him here.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe it does. I mean, here's the other thing is we don't know how much McDavid had to do with Duncan Keith coming to Edmonton, right?
Right.
I mean, who knows, right? Who knows for sure how much he had to do with that, and what the pressure was, right? After Holland said, "Hey, McDavid, do you want to call? You want Duncan Keith on this team?" And McDavid says, "Yes, go out and get him. I don't care what it costs, but I want this guy," right? Like, we don't know the pressure that Holland's under, right? Like, if that's the guy that McDavid says, that's the guy you go get. This is I'm just bringing up something that really, I mean, up until now, I've held off on, because the last thing those guys need is for the Oilers fan base to jump on them. I'm just saying they're part of the team, right? Like, they're part of the team. McDavid is the biggest part of this team, and he's having some effect on the roster composition. and it's about time, right? Like that, things start to change. That look, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I just he's not without blame anymore, right?
I don't think Connor has the same like LeBron James level of pull as basically he's your general manager, but I think there's definitely influence there.
Well,
For
it's got to be pretty damn close because this team has wallowed in, you know, like the
for
bottom
me,
for forever, right? And you have Connor McDavid, like he is the face of the franchise, right? Like you do not want him to go anywhere,
yeah,
right? If I'm Ken Holland, I get it. If I'm Ken Holland and Connor tells me he wants Duncan Keith, I go out and get Duncan Keith because in the back of my head I'm thinking, please don't ask for a trade, Mr. McDavid, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think you can run your team though totally afraid, because if you're that way, I think you've already lost it. Um, but the part that's like that I wrestle with is this losing streak under Tippett, I think is 10-2 or something. The only 2 wins came when he was kind of on the shelf with COVID himself.
Yeah, the only
And,
2 wins came when he wasn't behind. He's actually 12 in a row, I think, is what it is. 12
and
losses
and
in a row.
and at some point, I think there has to be a termination here, or Holland risks going down with them. You're both going to drown. You can only extend so much rope before you both go down. I don't exactly know what that point is, but we've got to be getting close to it.
Oh, well, okay. So here's the rumor, right? You've heard it. I've heard it. Is we're going to see a press conference tomorrow, an Oilers press conference tomorrow. Have you heard that? By the way, I mean maybe you have heard it, maybe I haven't, but I've been hearing from a couple of different sources.
Oilers Nation put that out earlier today, and people have
No, it wasn't
maybe
just Oilers Nation, though. I heard Rashog hinted at it. Gazzola hinted at it.
Well, by hinting at it, they retweeted Woodcroft's post game from last night when the Condors won. That was the hint. So I don't know how much stock you want to put into that, but people have said that Woodcroft was on a flight from LA to Edmonton today.
Oh, well, that stuff I don't believe. I mean, we saw Evander Kane was everywhere in Edmonton.
Something tells me that there might be a press conference, but what is that going to mean? I don't know. Is Ottawa losing to Ottawa the last straw, or was dropping 10 games? I don't know. I don't know really what to think of it. I'm highly skeptical. Ken does a press conference, before, what was it, before, kind of during that layoff there.
So the Ken Holland press conference, by the way, was requested, right? Like that was the Oilers giving in to the press demands, right? And I I get that. They
and that press conference was okay, status quo.
Yeah, but well, I mean and he has no choice, right? Like he can't go out there and say, "Look, Tippett's got one more game left." I mean, we've seen this a million times. The GM says, "Oh yeah, no, he's good," and then the next day he fires his coach. I mean, it's like any boss right out there. You don't let them know until they're Friday afternoon, right?
Right. Do you pick up that same vibe though with Ken Holland? Because I don't. I think he's been pretty transparent, and pretty much what he says is what he does. Like he doesn't seem like the best poker player to me.
Yeah. Here's my thing. I think so. I just. I questioned after his presser. He said, he did allude to the fact that there would be a point that there could be a point at which he would make a change.
Yeah.
Right? Like he did hint at that. He didn't say what it was, and I think a lot of us left there thinking that was, somewhere, 10 games down the line when we're well out of a playoff spot.
Right. I mean, I'm skeptical because at some point, like I say, like you're both going to drown if you don't let go of the rope at some point. But are we there now? Maybe.
Well, I mean, what? I mean, how much more there could we possibly be? I guess.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think we
don't
were
know.
there 3 games
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
But
I mean, let's have a look at the standings. I'm looking at the standings right now, off NHL.com, and we are there are two ahead of us. So we're sitting 3 spots out of a wild card spot, and Winnipeg and Calgary are next in line, both with a game in hand on us. Like that, at this point of the season, right? This is the point of the season that in a normal year, we would say this is how the playoffs are going to shake out, right? This is where the good money is, right? Is whoever's in there right now, that's who's going to be in there. Maybe Calgary beats San Jose to get in there. Maybe they don't, right? San Jose's got, they've played an extra 5 games and they're only 2 points up. But the Oilers, if you're looking at the standings today, are not going to be in the playoffs. They had a chance to be in that spot right outside of the wild card position, tied with Calgary, maybe a game in hand last night, going into the third period. They had a chance, and they blew it. And now, I mean, you said it, right? Like the thing is that was a turning point last night, right? Like last night's a big turning point. You saw it in McDavid. You saw it in everything. You saw it in the media. You saw it in everything that came out the next day, today. It's a turning point. It's a, it's one of those moments in time that you can look at and say, remember when the Oilers lost to Ottawa, right? Remember when the Oilers lost to Ottawa. And at that point, right, this is a moment in time that everybody can point to as being an inflection point for the Oilers where they have to do something. Even like they're obviously they can't sign Evander Kane tomorrow, right? So they've got to do something. So I believe a press conference is going to happen tomorrow. If it's Tippett, we'll see. I don't know. But if you don't do anything after today, this team is done. If nothing happens between now and next game, I guarantee you this team is not making the playoffs. Like this was it. This was the you can't there's no other time, right? This is the time that Holland was talking about. This is the moment that, you said, well, we'll wait and see. We got to pass too many people to get into the playoffs. Right? I'm frustrated as a fan right now, right? Like couldn't be any worse.
How could you not be?
Man, it is, and it's embarrassing to be an Oilers fan. Like,
yeah, I don't feel
Vancouver's a point behind us.
I don't feel an embarrassment. Like I'm like in shock. It's like, you think all summer, you see kind of, what you think is going to improve this team, bringing in Zach Hyman, having kind of the same weapons. The only thing I was really hypercritical of is we didn't do anything about the goaltending. We went status quo. And to me, that was the biggest area of concern. Okay, I thought we kind of, bringing in Keith, shipping out Caleb Jones and a pick. I think that's a bit of an improvement, although the cost is heavy. I kind of think in my head that, we traded Ethan Bear for Warren Fogle. We lost a little bit of defensive capability, but brought in, somebody to kind of help try to strengthen the bottom six. And that kind of made a spot for Evan Bouchard. And, bringing back Barry, okay, that's your power play kind of quarterback sort of specialist guy. I didn't think we really downgraded our D. I thought if anything, it would kind of held the same, or if not, got a little bit better. losing Larson, you lost a little bit of that tenacity, but kind of gained some puck moving ability. And that's probably one of the things that Connor liked, having guys that could get him the puck. And I'm in utter disbelief because I believed in this group. I didn't think we were as good as the start, but I definitely didn't think we'd be a team that is struggling to win a game against anybody, and
Yeah.
I'll be shocked, but almost wouldn't surprise me either if they hold their own against the better teams in the league. They're such a Jekyll and Hyde kind of team, and they've been that way for a long time. They underestimate the teams that they should take to the woodshed, and the really good teams, they play their asses off and kind of come out okay sometimes. I don't know. And to me, it's just like, you try to think of, and some people say an identity doesn't matter. I think it does, because it sets like the tone of how you're going to play. This team doesn't beat anybody up physically. They're not like the 90s Oilers that you walk out of a game and you knew you played one, because they were racking up 50 to 100 hits in a game. It's not that way. And
hey, we ran into the goalie last night. That's an improvement. there was
Cassian.
yeah. I mean, this team lacks in its ability to drive the net. I want to get to some. There's been a lot of comments on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Shannon says we're seeing how important Nuge is to the team right now. Missing him on obviously the PP, the PK. We haven't touched on that tonight. Let's chat quickly about that. Jeff on YouTube, been an Oilers fan since '79 and have had enough of the absolute tire fire of this team. And then Brave 187 on YouTube. Do you guys think Keith will retire next year? If he does, Edmonton will get his cap and another $3 million. Yeah, I don't know where to start. I want to start on one thing, and Mike, I'll let you comment on the things. Being an Oilers fan since '79, I haven't been an Oilers fan that long because I'm not old enough to remember them playing in '79. I'm not that far behind, but I tell you this: the one thing that the absolute tire fire this team has become. I mean, here's the thing: is this team, and it's organizationally from the top all the way down to the bottom. I look at guys like Tippett, guys like Holland, and I like Holland. Don't get me wrong, and I'm sure Tippett's a fine gentleman. But this team seems to be lacking in the areas of innovation that other teams have embraced over the years recently, and it shows in hires like Holland, shows in hires like Tippett, it shows in the type of trades that they make, and it shows in everything, and so I don't think this team has become a tire fire. I just think they haven't evolved with the rest of the league. And, that the challenge, we always called it the old boys club. I think that's still there, that sort of idea, this whole traditional aspect of the team. But you look at a team like Toronto, who, while they haven't been able to get out of the first round, they continually find players that meet the needs, whether it's adding in. You don't need to go all in on analytics, but at least do a little bit, right? And do a little bit of everything. Like, our own Ryan Lotzberg wrote on heavyhockey.com about how he would play the bottom six. So if you guys go there and look, and he uses analytics to come up with some line combinations. I just don't feel like that sort of thing has ever been done with this team. So there's that, and then there's the Ryan Nugent-Hopkins thing. I mean, Shannon, without a doubt, he's so important to this team. And then as far as Keith retiring, I don't know. I mean, Keith, I just think I feel like he's going to play it out. If he retired, it would be so great, but I just can't see us being that lucky. Anyway, okay, Mike, your thoughts on all of that stuff. It is your show, but I'm kind of taking.
Well, you know what? I'll start at the what you finished with. I honestly believe that that was Duncan Keith's best game last night. It was against Ottawa Senators, so I don't know how much stock you want to put into that, but the passing was crisp and on the tape, and his reads were good, and I thought him and Nurse were pretty solid last night. Maybe having the switch of CC go with Nurse and doing that might have helped out. I didn't mind his game. Is he going to walk away at the end of the season? I would say it probably depends on how the rest of the season goes for the guy. If they're shitty the rest of the way, maybe that pushes him to retirement too. I think he did honestly believe that this was a good team and he was walking into a good situation and felt like he could help them somewhat. And if that totally backfires, maybe that makes him decide to spend more time with the family and escape kind of the aggravation and do us a favor at the same time by giving us another $5.5 million to spend on somebody else. But we'll see what goes on there. Definitely miss Nuge on the power play. That's evident. He might not rack up the points, but he sure controls play along the walls and makes smart decisions and good reads and good passes there. And when he has his opportunities, that guy still has a lethally accurate wrist shot. And I'd rather see him on the PP than not. But, injuries happen and you have to be able to play through it. Other teams go through it. We're pretty healthy now, and he's really the only one that's
And when he's that far down the depth chart, right? Like, not saying he's far down the depth chart, but teams usually look at Tampa Bay, right? Like, they could when they got top guys out, other guys step up. We just haven't had that. I don't know if it's been talking about the coaching all night, but
Tampa Bay can run to the Stanley Cup final before they need Kucherov.
Yeah,
like that's like taking McDavid or Draisaitl out of this lineup. Well, where would we be? Not very far, I can tell you that. That I know.
Yeah.
And as for the lifelong Oilers fan thing, I mean, I think my first vivid memory of the Oilers is there's a new bunch on the block by name. The Oilers have just won the Stanley Cup. I was 8 years old when we won our first cup, and I remember that call pretty vividly. So it's, you've been in this for a long time. You've invested a lot of man hours, and you went through the decade of darkness. And I think if it wasn't for Ales Hemsky and Ryan Smith, a lot of us probably would have walked away because there was not much else to cheer for. And then you kind of take a deep breath. Oh, we've landed McDavid, so everything is going to be good, and we're going to get back to the promised land. And now, you're really questioning, well, are we? Is that going to happen, or what's it going to take? And I don't know. I don't have a clear-cut answer for that. If you bring in a true bona fide number one goalie, is that enough to get it done? And I'm not convinced that that's it either. I mean, Tampa Bay has a really deep team, and then they have Vasilevsky, who's, if not the best goalie in the league, he's easily in the top 5. So I think there's a lot that needs to happen here.
Yeah, we're nowhere near. We can't even begin to start thinking Stanley Cup yet because we're nowhere near those teams. We're nowhere near Colorado. We're nowhere near Tampa Bay. Right
now it's a matter, I thought at the beginning of the season, if Tippett doesn't win a round, he's got to go. I was kind of the 3 strikes, you're out. Do we even make the playoffs now? It's a serious question mark. The 90s Oilers, this was where they were, and then they would have a hell of a run and they would squeak in. Do these guys do that? Do they have another good run in them? Because they're going to need it. They've dug it after that great start. Now they've dug that hole where they're going to need a lights out run again.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this team is capable of it, right? As we saw at the beginning of the season, They're capable of putting goals in the net. They're capable of doing enough things. They should be a playoff team. There's no doubt. As I've said, you could go back to pretty much any episode, right? I always say, if I had McDavid and Draisaitl on my team, I should be able to at least make the playoffs. Where you go from there is, dependent on other factors, but at the very least, you should be making the playoffs.
I don't even want to think about this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Are we headed for another summer? It's probably not going to be in a log cabin again, but it almost feels like deja vu with Wayne asking to be, I promised Mess I wouldn't do this. Like, is that where this is going? And I'm sorry, but I got to ask it. Like, seeing Connor's face last night, you almost think like, Jesus Christ, we're at that point where he might be wanting out of this.
Well,
and I don't want to think that, because he's got his best. Well, like Darnell and Leon are the guy's best friends, right? And they're on his team, so you want to think like it's one for all and all for one and all that. But I don't know.
Here's my thought on that, because it would piss me off to no end if we ever, if it ever ends up in my inbox or I see it on Twitter that Connor's asked for a trade, and it goes to exactly what I was talking about, is there are elements of this team that are Connor's doing, right? Like, there are things that I know, he talked about it. He said, look, Holland's great. He's always been very open and transparent, right?
Maybe that helps keep him here then.
Well, at the very least, he better take some pride in the stuff he had a part in, right? And say, I had a part in this. I want to win with this squad, right? Like, so if he was to, if he was to ever ask for a trade, and I don't think we're there yet. At least I hope we're not. But if he ever does, then guarantee I'll be, one of those people at the next game that's maybe booing him for leaving, right? Like, I just, to me, this is his team. But hey, I don't want to talk about it because I like Connor McDavid. I think as I've said, repeatedly, he's probably if not the best player we've seen in forever. He is definitely one of. He's got some things he will continue to work on, and he seems to other than this slump, he seems to get better at certain things year over year, and I like to think that we haven't even seen the best of Connor McDavid yet. And so, I don't think we're there yet, but I think where we're at right now, that today, is that the Oilers lost to the 30th place team. And if they're not calling a press conference tomorrow, then they've missed the only opportunity they have to right this ship. And that's my view of it.
You ever boo Wayne?
No, I wouldn't boo Wayne. Wayne though accomplished something in his time with Edmonton, right? Like,
more than individual accolades, yeah.
Yeah, like, and that's just it. Like, and Wayne was sold. I hesitate.
Wayne was sold anyway.
Yeah. I hesitate to say all these things because, look, I'm a big Connor McDavid fan. You go into my jersey collection, and he's the only jersey I've ever had a number of. That's a lie. I had Messier, but they. That's it. So I hesitate with all that, and I'm not putting any of this on Connor McDavid. To me, this is a coaching thing, but at some point, the whole team's got to come to Jesus here.
Yeah, McJesus. You can criticize Connor without being critical of Connor too.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And people need to learn that. Like, is he a fabulous player? Yes. Is he the most electrifying player we've ever seen? Yes. Is he going to go down in time as probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time? Maybe. We'll see. But are there things that he still needs to work on his game? Yes. Yes. And, that's not a shot at him. I, I mean, I watch, I watch a lot of 90s NBA basketball, and there was nobody that worked harder on their games than Michael Jordan.
Oh, yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
he would listen to people say, you can't play defense. He goes out and wins a defensive player of the year. Like everything that people would point out as a weakness, he would turn that into a strength. And that's what Connor needs to do. I mean, Ovechkin was the same way. He only plays offense. He's taken 3.5-minute shifts in overtime. Well, he worked on that, and he worked on his defensive game, and they ended up winning a Stanley Cup. He changed the way he played. Part of that was to do with the coaching change, though, too.
Yeah.
And him listening and him buying in. The same thing happened with Michael Jordan. He was a great offensive player. Doug Collins was his coach. You go do whatever you want, Michael. It's all on you. They lose to the Detroit Pistons. The Bulls fire Doug Collins. They bring in Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson tells Michael, you got to distribute to these other guys out there so you don't get exhausted and you can win games. It's too easy to guard one guy. It's harder to guard 5. They win 6 championships. I mean, and I think that's where we're at. What happened last night? Well, we play Connor and Leon 25 minutes, exhaust them. The other guys are hungry and they're going, but we're not giving them any time.
That was the strategy after 10 days off, by the way.
Yeah.
That was all the game tape, all the everything, all the practices. That was the strategy.
Yeah. I mean, they probably had the energy to skate, but so did the other guys. Give them some time. It looked like, honestly, like Fogel and Yamamoto were having fun. Okay, sit down. And I don't know, just and the decisions with Puljujärvi. I mean, give the guy some time. He's tenacious. Like, you got an extra man on and he's not out there. Like, I don't know. It just, from a tactical standpoint, I have questions with Dave Tippett, and from a deployment standpoint, I have questions with the guy. He'll do things that are genius. He'll create the Draisaitl Yamamoto Nuge line. They'll be the best line in the NHL, and then you'll break it up for absolutely no reason and wait forever to put them back together and lose any chemistry they ever had. Yeah. It's like, it's not broken, but let's fix it. Like, he's sometimes just outthinks himself. Like, there's genius in his coaching, and then it's all taken away with the other end of it. I still don't really have a grasp of what he's trying to get them to do from a tactical standpoint. Like, sometimes they'll play a high pressure game and sometimes they don't. And mixing things up, I think, is essential in the NHL, but it's almost like you've lost everybody by overthinking and not having, like I say, a bona fide identity. Like, are you a skill team, or are you a pressure team? I don't know. And it seems like, like watching last night, it was like Connor against everybody. And usually him and Leon have chemistry, and they're working the puck back and forth and making things happen. And I didn't really see that last night. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's about 1:15 out here on the East Coast.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. No, I mean, thanks for having me. I'm glad I could fill in for Dash. Probably none of what I said he probably agrees with, but actually I think we're on the same boat on a lot of things right now. In fact, you know what? I think most Oilers fans are in the same boat for a lot of things. We've got a few different arguments on how to get there, but the one thing we can all agree on is this team's broken. Yeah. Oh man.
And then, there's the other end of it where people are like, well, we've went through coaches. I don't know, if you don't have the right one, you got to keep looking.
I'd say that side of the house right now, even the Spectors and those guys right now, they're probably, at the point where, like, to me, I can't see there being much argument anymore. Right? Like, the only person that is going to hang on and like, if Dave Tippett tomorrow gets fired, if there is a press conference and Dave Tippett gets fired, I'll tell you that Spector's next article will say, the writing was on the wall, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and in that he'll say, look, you can't go, the last 12 games behind the bench and lose straight when you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. That'll be Spector's article. And
Yeah.
I'm not gonna I won't be calling him a hypocrite for saying it because he's right at this point. He's right. I mean, he might have been wrong before, or at that moment in time he might have been even right, but nothing changed since that day. And so, like that's going to be the article everybody writes if Tippett gets let go tomorrow, is at some point you got to pay the pauper, right? And if you lose 12 in a row and you've got the two best players in the world, it shouldn't come as any surprise to Tippett if he gets that phone call.
Right? And it shouldn't really come to, and I don't think it'll come to a shock to any fans either.
No. Like, I mean, maybe people will argue that there are other things that can be done, but this has to be the least of which that you can do in the near term. Like, no GM, there's not GMs lining up to make a trade with the Oilers tonight, right? And you always need a dancing partner to make a trade. And
there probably are, but we are not exactly dealing from a position of strength. So
yeah, exactly. So that's where we're at. Yeah. So it's time, I think. Tonight it's time for me. I'm gonna get some sleep, and hopefully we'll wake up to the morning to some news that the team's made some changes. We'll see what they are.
Yeah, it's pretty grim right now. So, hopefully it's not another status quo press conference. I guess that remains to be seen. But
yeah,
we will let you go. We will say goodnight, and hopefully, there's something to be optimistic about after Thursday's game against the Florida Panthers, although that seems pretty scary right now. As I say every night to close, keep your sticks on the ice, keep reaching for the stars, and go Oilers, go. Have a good night.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.